Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Lewis McGlynn.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Saoirse Healy.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Donald C. Stewart. Broadcasting Scotland is Scotland's independent broadcaster, providing factual news, reporting on the issues important to the people of Scotland.
We are committed to public service broadcasting, and with your support, we will produce even more programmes.
Provide opportunities for young people interested in media production and broadcasting, and challenge preconceptions of what Scottish media looks like, amplifying Scotland's voice and reflecting its communities.
We can already deliver high-quality live news, and we will create the highest quality programmes for you to enjoy. But we can only do that with your support.
So please subscribe to and share our channel or donate to Broadcasting Scotland via the link in the description. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. The first item of business is general questions, and at question number 1 I call Gordon MacDonald.
To ask the Scottish Government how Scotland's recorded crime rate compares with other areas of the UK.
Cabinet Secretary Angela Constance.
Presiding Officer, Scotland's recorded crime statistics cannot be compared to the rest of the UK due to the different counting and classification systems used to produce the data. However, with a 40% fall in recorded crime across Scotland since 2006-07, including a 74% fall in housebreaking and a 68% fall in the theft of a motor vehicle, the long-term trend is clear. Crime surveys can provide some comparisons with the latest findings suggesting that in both Scotland and England and Wales, around 1 in 10 adults experience violent and property crimes. This has fallen significantly for both jurisdictions since 2008-09.
Gordon MacDonald.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer, and I also welcome that recorded crime has halved since 1991. But what impact will the £25 million increase in national insurance by the UK Labour Government have on Police Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, as this Government and indeed this Parliament has repeatedly made clear, the UK Government decision to increase employer national insurance contributions will have a major impact on all sectors, with the hike likely to result in higher costs, job losses and increased prices. The impact will also be felt by our frontline public services like Police Scotland, and we estimate this change could add over £700 million in costs for public sector staff, and the Treasury must fully fund the actual costs for Scotland's public sector and not just give a much lower value Barnett's share of spending in England.
Liam Kerr.
Given the reports that up to a quarter of crimes go unreported, with over 215,000 101 calls discontinued between January and July 24, and that since 2013 over 140 police stations and 100 police counters have closed, and there are nearly 1,000 fewer police officers in 2020, with the Aberdeen pilot to not investigate all crimes extended across Scotland, is the Cabinet Secretary investigating what impact these facts have on recorded crime rates, or are simplistic comparisons to other parts of the UK simply easier?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, Presiding Officer, I have no interest in making simplistic comparisons, but it is important that we focus on the facts and actually the strength of the Scottish Crime and Justice Survey is that it both captures not just recorded crime but also the experience of crime, and therefore it is testimony to the hard work of Police Scotland and indeed other parts of the justice system that there has been a significant fall in reports of victimisation from around 20% to the current reports of around 1 in 10.
Thank you. Question number 2, Miles Briggs.
To ask the Scottish Government, in light of the potential impact on state schools of the UK Government's decision to make independent schools liable for VAT, how it plans to use any Barnett consequential funding resulting from this decision to support state schools.
Cabinet Secretary Jenny Gilruth.
Formula does not entitle Scottish Government to consequentials raised under reserve powers. Block grant changes are calculated by reference to UK Government spend in devolved areas. UK Government previously had indicated that this VAT revenue would be ring-fenced and applied to the Department of Education budget to increase teacher numbers in England. HM Treasury has now advised that there is no ring-fencing to this revenue, while the autumn budget contained additional funding to the Department for Education, which led to Barnett consequentials. I am not able to confirm the proportion which has been funded by VAT on school fees.
Briggs.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer? This is becoming a growing concern here in Edinburgh, particularly. The Cabinet Secretary, in response to me, has shown that already 79 pupils have enrolled from the independent sector into the state sector. In response to the Education Committee, she gave us details that around 40% of all pupils attending independent schools in Scotland are here in Edinburgh. Can I ask, if we do finally get clarification from the UK Government over Barnett consequentials, if she will commit that 40% of this funding will go to Edinburgh City Council, which will be the largest impacted council?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank the member for his interest in this matter. We did discuss it very recently at the Education and Skills Committee, and of course I responded to a parliamentary question on this, a written question yesterday, which gave the detail that the member has alluded to today. And I think in response to the member, I've been very clear that the distribution methodology we use in terms of our funding to local government will take into account the issues the member has raised. I recognise that this issue is particularly pertinent in Edinburgh City Council because of the number of pupils within this area that attend the private school sector. So I hope the member takes some comfort from my response today, but I apologise I'm not able to give him that granular detail he asked for me in his original response because of the decisions taken by the UK Government.
Brief supplementary, Audrey Nicholl.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can the Cabinet Secretary perhaps outline how the budget for 25-26 is already earmarked to provide support for state schools, specifically how the Scottish Government is supporting the recruitment of additional teachers, which is a significant issue in my constituency?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, the 25-26 Scottish Budget provides record block grant funding of over £15 billion for local government, an increase of £1.1 billion or 5.5% in real terms when compared to 24-25. And of course the 25-26 local government finance settlement also includes an extra £186.5 million to increase teacher numbers to 23 levels and a further £28 million of funding for the additional support for learning workforce. There is also an additional £1 million which has specifically been earmarked to help support national initiatives which will help to recruit and train more ASL teachers, including, of course, in the member's constituency.
Thank you. Brief supplementary, Pam Duncan-Glancy.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The UK Government have increased funding for the Department of Education by much more than what the VAT policy is raising, meaning Scotland is getting Barnett consequentials worth more than just the VAT policy. And this week, NAS UWT published research showing worrying increases in incidences of violence in school, and that 62% of respondents weren't aware of the Government's national plan on this. So can I ask the Cabinet Secretary, will she use some of the increased funding to implement commitments set out in her National Action Plan?
Cabinet Secretary.
The increased funding to which the member alludes to was included in the Scottish Government's budget. As I have just outlined in my response to Ms Nicholl, that's £186.5 million to increase teacher numbers back to 2023 levels and an extra £29 million for additional support needs in our schools to help, for example, in the recruitment of additional support needs teachers, which of course can help in responding to some of the challenge the member has set out today. I do not understand how, on the one hand, the member can come to the Chamber today and praise this additionality coming to the Scottish Government, and her party have then taken a decision to not vote in favour of the Scottish Government budget, which delivers on the challenge put out in the NASWIT report.
Thank you. Question number 3, Carol Mochan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to the reported view of the Children and Young Persons Commissioner Scotland that proposed changes to legislation on religious observance diverged from the recommendation by the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child to allow young people to independently opt out of religious observance at school.
Cabinet Secretary.
As the First Minister noted in the Chamber last week, we have consulted with a wide range of stakeholders on changes to legislation on religious observance and religious and moral education in schools, with the public consultation having closed on the 26th of January. We recognise there are a wide range of views on this topic, and Ministers will of course continue to discuss these issues with Parliament and other interested parties. We will consider all responses to the consultation and publish a consultation analysis report in due course, as well as outlining next planned steps.
Mochan.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for the answer. The 2022 census found that over 60% of school-aged children in Scotland now identify as non-religious. In an increasingly secular and religious diverse country, it is critically important that young people of all faiths and none have their beliefs and choices respected in school. Parents have always had the right to opt their children out of religious observance, which all state schools are legally required to provide, but pupils have no equivalent right, no matter their age, maturity or personal beliefs. Therefore, given the Cabinet Secretary's answer, can I ask for some clarity on timeframes around when we might get this information, and is it her view that we should conform to the UN Committee's recommendations?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, of course, the legislative changes that are being proposed in the consultation are going to strengthen the rights of children and young people in Scotland, which I think is the point the member is alluding to, and I'm very supportive of that. But it also builds on our commitment in relation to the UNCRC. Existing guidance that the member has also alluded to encourages schools to discuss the question of opting out of religious observance with both parents and with children. The member will understand that the consultation analysis has not yet published. I'd be more than happy to write to her with the associated timescales with that consultation in due course once I've received that advice from my officials.
Brief supplementary from Willie Coffey.
Thank you. Can the Cabinet Secretary just outline how the Scottish Government is ensuring children's rights are incorporated across our education system?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, we are committed to upholding the rights of children and young people across Scotland and supporting public authorities to understand and fulfil their UNCRC duties, including in our education system. In May 2022, we awarded UNICEF UK a 3-year grant to support them to raise awareness of children's rights across the majority of Scottish schools through their Rights Respecting School Award. And I was very pleased yesterday to visit Glenrothes High School in my own constituency to see the impact that that award at gold level in Glenrothes High School is having on the rights of children in that school in Fife.
Brief supplementary, Patrick Harvey.
Thank you. If we believe in the principle of religious freedom, surely it's very clear that any pupil who's mature enough to decide that they are not a believer should not be required to go through a pretence of religious observance. In analysing the consultation responses, can the Cabinet Secretary assure us that she'll give due regard to the views of young people who want to make this perfectly reasonable choice for themselves?
Secretary.
Yes, of course, I recognise the views of the member. It's important that we balance those views accordingly. I am also mindful there are a range of different views on this topic, and as I alluded to, I think in my response to Ms Mochan, I will give due consideration to those views once I've received the consultation analysis and can set out more detail in relation to the timescales associated.
Thank you. Question number 4 is not lodged. At question number 5, I call Emma Harper.
To ask the Scottish Government which steps it's taken to support increased levels of sport and physical activity in Dumfries and Galloway.
Minister Marie Todd.
We are working in partnership with Public Health Scotland, Sport Scotland and colleagues in Dumfries and Galloway to identify evidence-based actions based on our physical activity for health framework, which will improve levels of physical activity in the area. Sport Scotland has provided £424,000 to Dumfries and Galloway Council this year to support its Active Schools programme, community sport hubs, community cycling and coaching. Recent investment of £880,000 has been delivered through Sport Scotland Sports Facilities Fund and Cycle Facilities Fund, and £845,000 has been awarded via the Transforming Scottish Indoor Tennis Fund to construct a new indoor facility in Dumfries.
Emma Harper.
Thank the Minister for that answer. I was pleased to hear of recent announcements which encourage a higher uptake of physical activity for my constituents in the area, particularly the creation of the Stranraer Water Sports Hub, expected to open in 2026, and the new indoor tennis courts development at the King George V complex in Dumfries. Will the Minister join me in welcoming these significant investments to the sports sector in Dumfries and Galloway, and would she consider joining me to visit both sites to see the marked improvement that this will make for local people?
Minister.
Absolutely welcome these significant facilities investments, and both of these developments will have such a positive impact on the local community, providing more and better opportunities to be physically active either on the water or on a tennis court, and I'd be absolutely delighted to visit both sites to see the positive impact firsthand.
Question number 6, Stuart McMillan.
And also to ask the Scottish Government when it last discussed the future of Greenock Police Station with Police Scotland.
Cabinet Secretary Angela Constance.
Sign Officer, I last discussed the police estate with the Chief Constable in January when we discussed Police Scotland's estate master plan, which sets out their plans to modernise the police estate to ensure it best serves communities and the Police Scotland workforce and is fit for the future. Despite unprecedented challenges to public finances for 2025-26, we will increase the police capital budget to £75 million, an increase of over £10 million, and this capital increase will support Police Scotland to commence delivery of its estate master plan, which will deliver a modern fit-for-purpose estate that best serves the needs of communities and the policing workforce.
Stuart McMillan.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that reply, and it's well documented that the Greenock Police Station is well past its sell-by date. The facility is no longer fit for purpose, and the volume and cost of repairs will only continue to grow. Whilst acknowledging there is no question about the future of a replacement police station in Greenock, there is no firm commitment with regards to replacing the custody suite, which is absolutely crucial. And can I ask the Cabinet Secretary if she received any assurances that any new Greenock Police Station will have a custody suite?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, it's a very important point that Mr McMillan raises in and around the provision of custody suites and their location in his locality and across Scotland. Can I assure him that Police Scotland's initial work on its estate master plan has identified Glasgow and the west of Scotland are priority areas for further work, and they are currently undertaking detailed work to understand the property requirements, and this will include custody facilities across these communities to ensure that they can continue to deliver effective policing.
Time is tight. A brief supplementary, Jamie Green.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I endorse the comments by Mr McMillan? Police Scotland wrote to me 2 years ago to say that they were considering a replacement for Greenock Police Station. It is now needed more than ever. Last year, common assault was up 10%, violent crime was up 7%, and domestic abuse was up 20% in the Inverclyde area. So surely the Cabinet Secretary can see the need to get some action on this quickly.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, let me assure the member that no decision has been taken on the future of Greenock Police Station at this time, and this will be considered as part of the delivery of the wider Police Scotland Estates Master Plan. I'm aware of the consultation, very important consultation, that has been held with respect to services in Greenock. That consultation has now closed, and the results of that consultation, I can assure members, remain under review, and in January last year, the divisional commander across Renfrewshire and Inverclyde certainly attended Inverclyde's Council's police scrutiny panel to discuss the details, and I'm sure that members will be kept informed on these very important matters.
Question number 7, Evelyn Tweed.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how it will work with NHS to ensure that infrastructure is in place to meet demand for adult ADHD and autism assessments in light of reports that NHS Forth Valley has closed its service.
Minister Marie Todd.
I recognise that the significant increase in adults seeking ADHD and autism assessments across Scotland is creating challenges for services. However, a diagnosis can be crucial to receiving the right support, and I expect this situation to be resolved at the earliest opportunity. My officials are liaising with NHS boards across Scotland, including in Forth Valley, to understand what provision they have in place and are exploring how to address current issues.
Tweed.
I thank the Minister for that answer. My constituent Jake has struggled with his mental health for many years. A CAMHS professional suspected ADHD, however, no formal diagnosis was forthcoming. Jake finally got a private diagnosis of ADHD, but now can't access NHS support. To ask the Scottish Government what pathways and support are available to those in this position.
Minister.
As I said, we're working with local health bodies to improve services and support. The General Medical Council's good practice guidance on shared care advises that decisions about who should take responsibility for continuing care or treatment after initial diagnosis or assessment should be based on the patient's best interest. It is at the clinical discretion of each individual GP to decide the best course of action for their patients, and whilst a recommendation from a private specialist does not entitle the patient to NHS prescriptions for that medicine, medication can be considered as part of the shared care agreement. I must say I am concerned that GPs sometimes do face pressure to prescribe when the assessment is sufficient, but the patient's moving to NHS and has not yet been accepted into the NHS psychiatry side of the shared care agreement. And the challenge is if the monitoring
please, Minister.
If the monitoring requirements made by a private provider differ from the NHS recommendations, that leaves the GP prescriber in a very difficult and potentially unsafe situation.
Thank you. A concise question 8, Colin Beattie.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on Action 20 of the Housing to 2040 strategy to streamline and accelerate the adaptation system.
Mr Paul McLennan.
We are taking forward a review of the current housing adaptation system to consider how the process can be streamlined and made easier for people who need adaptations. We are also continuing to provide support to help registered social landlords meet their responsibilities to deliver housing adaptations. The 2025-6 budget will more than double the budget for this to £20.9 million.
Colin Beattie.
I thank the Minister for that answer. I was pleased to take part in last week's members' business debate on protections for park home residents, where I raised the issue of park homes being exempt from financial help towards home adaptations, as per the Housing Scotland Act. Can the Minister please advise what steps the Scottish Government will take to improve protections for park home residents?
Minister.
We are committed to making sure that park home residents have appropriate rights and protections. The Adaptations Review will consider funding and legislation, including the situation for mobile homes. In addition, the Housing Scotland Bill proposes a change in the basis for pitch fee updating from RPI to CPI. I also intend to engage with local authorities to remind them of their powers in relation to site licensing, with Ofgem to raise issues faced by park home residents in relation to oil, and the UK Government to highlight the impact of mis-selling mobile homes on Scottish consumers.
Thank you. That concludes general questions. The next item of business is First Minister's questions, and at question number 1, I call Russell Finlay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In recent weeks, I've had the privilege of meeting apprentices in businesses across Scotland at Thales in Govan, Collins Aerospace in Prestwick, and yesterday Persimmon Homes in East Lothian, where I have to report it became clear that I'll never make it as a brickie. Now, this week we started a public debate on reducing the school leaving age from 16. It's long been clear that far too many young people are being failed by the SNP's education system, and we propose giving those young people who are being left behind the opportunity of a hybrid education and training in colleges and the workplace. So does John Swinney agree that this conversation is long overdue, and will he give any consideration to our proposals?
First Minister.
I have to say this is a bold approach to First Minister's questions, given the fact that yesterday when Mr Finlay set out his proposals, he conceded in a television interview that it was not in fact certain that these proposals would reach anywhere near a Conservative manifesto. So I'm not sure Mr Finlay's got quite as much confidence after that one interview in his policy than he puts to me today. I don't agree with these proposals. We've spent a great deal of time and effort on trying to encourage young people to maximise their engagement with education. That has resulted in more young people staying on at school, and as a consequence, more young people leaving school and going into positive destinations. And indeed, positive destinations.
Let's hear the First Minister.
Indeed, positive destinations are at record levels. So I don't intend to follow the policy approach being proposed by Mr Finlay, but then I don't think he does either.
Russell Finlay.
Scotland's business community can see this issue needs proper political attention. And last night I attended a think tank event where senior people from business and education voiced their support. They can see that over the last 18 years of SNP rule, far too many young people are being left behind. Former SNP government economic advisor Jim McCall said, and I quote, "A lot of these youngsters at school don't want to be there, they're not interested in it, and all of a sudden you're giving them an opportunity to learn a trade and be earning money." So I feel it's a brilliant move.
Let's hear Mr Finlay.
This Parliament needs to focus more on encouraging opportunity and aspiration and on giving pupils the chance to thrive. So doesn't John Swinney see that we need to do things differently?
First Minister.
Well, I'm all for encouraging young people to thrive and all for taking the opportunities to make sure that's the case. So that's why, under this government, we've reformed the approach to apprenticeships. So, for example, while young people are school pupils, they can take forward foundation apprenticeships as part of a work-based learning in the senior phase, which can result in the senior phase in young people spending a day per week working with an employer. Now, we've now got 15,000, since their introduction in 2016, 15,371 pupils have enrolled on a foundation apprenticeship and have benefited from the value of work-based learning, with 5,000 places now available each year. Now, that's the type of pragmatic approaches this government takes to make sure that we address the issue that Mr Finlay raises with me, that school doesn't suit everybody, so we are adapting the curriculum to make sure it does suit young people through the use of foundation apprenticeships, which I think has been one of the excellent reforms introduced by this government.
Russell Finlay.
As a former Education Secretary, John Swinney knows fine well that far too many young people are being left behind, no matter what selective statistic he quotes at me. 1 in 7 Scottish pupils leave school without a single qualification, and he thinks that's good enough. Last year, 500,000 days were lost to unexplained absences of S4 pupils. Thousands of bright, talented and dynamic young people simply drop out the system. Far too many are being failed by this complacent government. Is John Swinney telling us that he's really content to deprive thousands of young Scots a brighter and better future?
First Minister.
I want young people, as I've said in my earlier answer, to have the brightest future possible, which is why we have enabled schools to offer increased opportunities for young people to prepare for the world of work. So 35% of 23 to 24 school leavers gained a vocational or technical qualification at SCQF level 5 or above, which is an increase of 7.3% compared to 2014. So that's the government actually delivering practical steps to improve the work chances and the life chances of young people in Scotland. This government has reformed education to strengthen the opportunities for young people, and as a consequence, young people are leaving school, going on to positive destinations at record levels in Scotland today.
Russell Finlay.
He wanted to quote statistics around standards, but it's the lowest rate of higher passes for a decade in Scotland. And we've got an Education Secretary providing running commentary from a seated position. She'll have to stay behind for detention and set a very bad example to the pupils that are here today. But the problems with Scotland's schools run even deeper.
Let's hear one another.
The problems with Scotland's schools run even deeper than the scandal of so many young people being left behind. Over 80% of teachers say that violent and abusive behaviour has increased. They told of being assaulted with knives, chairs and hockey sticks in a teaching union survey that was published just this week. They've been bitten, spat on, headbutted, punched and kicked. They've had fireworks thrown at them and their cars vandalised. Teachers say that they are at breaking point and pupils' education is suffering. So what does the First Minister have to say to teachers about this breakdown in classroom discipline?
First Minister.
The first thing I would say is that I take deadly seriously the findings of the NASUWT survey, which was published this week, which is why the Education Secretary has been working with local authorities and with the trade unions on a whole series of interventions in relation to behaviour at school. I think it's important that for completeness we hear all of the issues that are raised by the NASUWT survey. The NASUWT said a greater focus on exploring correlation between behaviour issues and poverty is required. The General Secretary of the Educational Institute of Scotland said, since the onset of austerity, we've seen rising incidents of violent, aggressive, dysregulated, distressed behaviour in classrooms and growing incidents of additional support needs. Now, I acknowledge that in the atmosphere and the environment since COVID, there has been an increase in the challenging behaviour within schools. That's not unique to Scotland. Every education system in the Western world is reporting the same evidence. The Government will take the action, working with our local authorities and our trade union partners, to try to address this issue, because dysregular behaviour in our schools is unacceptable. But what I will not do is I will not do what Russell Finlay does, which is characterise all young people as behaving badly.
Thank you. Thank you.
Most young people behave well in our society, and I compliment young people on the achievements that they make in our country.
Question number 2, Anna Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, can I start by congratulating the First Minister on the wonderful news that he's become a grandfather. I'm sure everyone across the chamber, a young grandfather, I should emphasise, everyone across this chamber sends their best wishes to all his family on the birth of baby Rua. Presiding Officer, an NHS available and free when you need it. It's the founding principle of our NHS. But under the SNP, that principle, that promise has been broken. Right now, over 100,000 Scots are waiting over a year for hospital treatment, so it's not there when they need it. And just in the last 9 months, over 36,500 private procedures have been paid for by Scots, so it's not free when they need it. Why is the NHS no longer available and free at the point of need under John Swinney and the SNP?
Minister. First of all, President Officer, can I thank Mr Salwar for his generous and kind comments about the birth of my first grandson, and also welcome very much his characterisation of me as a young grandfather. That's the most precious remark that's helping me come to terms with all that's going on in my life just now. But his kindness and good wishes, as of many members across Parliament, is very deeply appreciated, and will be deeply appreciated by my daughter, her husband, and by Rua. So I'm grateful for that. In relation to the National Health Service, Mr Sarwar knows from our exchanges that this is an issue that commands my attention and is an absolute priority for me. I recognise that people are waiting too long for treatment in Scotland today, and we are very focused in the work that the Health Secretary and I are taking forward on reducing those waiting lists. Indeed, it was the subject of a lengthy discussion yesterday between the Health Secretary and I and NHS chief officers around the country. We are in a position where progress has been made. Figures published in February show a 4% decrease in the total waiting list size for diagnostic tests, which is one illustration of the improvements that are being made, and we are determined to focus on further improvements by ensuring that we increase the capacity of the National Health Service, we increase productivity at local level, and we are able to meet the needs of the population. Because the point that Mr Sarwar puts to me in principle of an NHS being available free at the point of need when people require it is exactly what I want to deliver for the people of Scotland.
Sarwar.
I think that's an admission that the First Minister wants to deliver it, but it doesn't exist for patients across the country. And the sad truth is that the NHS isn't even free and available for all those who work in the NHS. Take the experience of an NHS support worker from the west of Scotland. She has worked in our NHS for 35 years. Increasingly unable to walk due to her hip, she was left hobbling to work on crutches. Facing up to 3 years on an NHS waiting list and being forced to retire 9 years early or pay to go private, she took the difficult decision of withdrawing from her modest pension to pay for a private hip operation. The total cost of this to her was £24,000. That's almost her entire annual salary on an operation that should have been free. This is scandalous. So is John Swinney proud that even NHS workers are being forced to pay thousands of pounds of their own money to get the treatment they need?
First Minister.
I don't want that to be the case. I want individuals, particularly individuals in the circumstances that Mr Sarwar has put to me, to be able to access healthcare services when they require them, which is why the Health Secretary and I are working so intensively with health boards to increase the capacity and the capability of health boards around the country to deliver more procedures. And that's what it comes down to, be able to deliver more hip and knee operations, to be able to undertake more diagnostic activity. And the investment that has been made available through the Government's budget for the next financial year will help us to strengthen the delivery of those increased numbers of procedures. Now, of course, as Mr Sarwar will know, there is a significant expansion in the waiting list because of the interruption of COVID, which disrupted our healthcare services. We are working to recover from that as quickly as we possibly can do, and I give him my assurance that ministers are entirely focused and have put the financial support in place to make sure this is the case, that we are able to undertake more procedures than we are able to do so in this current financial year.
Anna Sarwar.
This NHS worker is not alone. Based on the data for the first 9 months of 2024, Scots have had to pay an estimated £17.6 million of their own money on cataract treatment, £30.8 million of their own money on hip replacements, an estimated £16 million of their own money on knee replacements, and most shockingly of all, Scots have had to pay thousands of pounds of their own money to fund 700 rounds of chemotherapy. Scots having to pay for cancer care under John Swinney and the SNP. This cannot go on. That's why, as First Minister, I will declare a waiting times emergency. This is your constituents I'm talking about who are having to pay for £1,000 of care. So I think you should reflect on the groaning. Declare a waiting times emergency and do whatever it takes to cut waiting lists across the country so that Scots get the care they need. Because isn't it the case that the SNP are the ones who broke our NHS and they can never be the ones to fix it?
First Minister.
Well, I think Mr Sarwar's used that line to me once or twice before, and I dare say I'll hear it a few times between now and the elections in May of 2026. But let me just try to address the substance of the points that Mr Sarwar makes. The first point is that on cancer care, I'm concerned about the points that Mr Sarwar has put to me, and I'd happily look in more detail at the issues that he's raised. But on the 31-day standard, 94.3% of patients were treated within 31 days of a decision to treat, with a median wait for treatment of just 4 days. 4 days, which is an exceptional performance. The 62-day standard is still, we're finding difficulty meeting that, but the median wait is 49 days from urgent suspicion of cancer referral to first treatment. Now, in addition to that, the Government is putting in place provisions through the work that is underway just now to deliver over 150,000 extra appointments and procedures. And in relation to some of the additional sites that we're bringing on to undertake orthopaedic appointments, which you asked me about, we expect to be able to deliver over 2,500 extra procedures in those sites. But of course, that's only possible because the Government's budget has been approved by Parliament, which invests a record amount of money in the National Health Service. Now, Mr Sarwar can say to Parliament
First Minister.
all he wants about his intentions for the years to come if he has the opportunity. But in the here and now, today, when Parliament faced the decision, are we going to fund the NHS to the level required, Mr Sarwar was posted missing.
Question number 3, Patrick Harvey.
Happy news is a rare and precious thing in these times, so can I echo the congratulations to the First Minister and his family for their new arrival. In April, energy bills are set to rise for the third time in less than a year, and people across Scotland are worried about those bills. And at the same time, energy companies are raking in vast profits at the expense of people and the planet. our energy markets are broken. Now, no doubt we could both say what we think the UK government should do to fix those markets, but the Scottish Government has also promised action that hasn't happened. My last question to the First Minister was nearly 3 months ago, and I asked him about his promise of a new law to end our reliance on gas for home heating, which is vital to tackling the climate emergency and cutting people's bills too. It was already overdue, without explanation, back in December. Now here we are in March. There's still no legislation and no explanation. Where is it?
First Minister.
President Officer, the Government is considering all of the issues raised in the consultation on heat in buildings. We will respond as soon as we can. I confirmed to Parliament that the tackling of the climate emergency is one of my key priorities. It's one of the 4 priorities of the Government, and heating our homes and workplaces causes around 20% of our emissions, and we cannot achieve net zero without ending our use of gas boilers.
Patrick Harvey.
Well, the Government was already considering the consultation a year ago, and the real concern is that they've been spending that time watering it down. That's the fear that I have and that I think the green heat industry has. The reality is Scotland is already well behind many other European countries on this. France and Germany have been accelerating their action. Scandinavian countries are decades ahead of us, and the only way to catch up and to give Scottish households the benefit of affordable, reliable heat and cutting the pollution that's destroying our environment is for the Government to act decisively and show leadership. But just as they've slowed down on other green measures by hiking rail fares and watering down rent controls, progress on clean heat has been stalled. Will the First Minister commit now to get this overdue legislation published this month to give the clarity and leadership that's been lacking?
First Minister.
I'm very happy to confirm to Parliament that there will be leadership to take this issue forward, as there is on a whole variety of different climate measures, which was evidenced by the financial commitments which the Government put forward in the budget, which Mr Harvey and his colleagues, I was delighted, were able to support. And I recognise the urgency and the seriousness of the issue, because as I look at the question of fuel poverty in our country, which is one of the key issues that underpins the question that Mr Harvey puts to me, it is clear that the impact of changes in energy prices on fuel poverty rates in Scotland have essentially increased, have almost doubled between 2019 and 2023. And if we have to acknowledge the significance of fuel prices and energy prices on having an impact on fuel poverty. It's one of the reasons why we have to take the action on climate, which Mr Harvey has raised with me. That's why it's central to the Government's agenda and why we will deliver progress as quickly as we possibly can do.
Thank you. Question number 4, Marie McNair.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister how the Scottish Government will mark International Women's Day and its theme of accelerating action to reach gender equality.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government is accelerating action for a fairer Scotland for women and girls, working to ensure women and girls have equal rights and opportunities, equitable access to resources and can live their lives free from abuse. This work includes delivering the Women's Health Plan, investing to tackle domestic violence against women and girls and survivors of abuse, and supporting women to access fair work and helping to reduce the gender pay gap. The Government will leave no stone unturned in our work towards equality. I know many members will be attending events this International Women's Day taking place across the country in local communities, and I wish everyone a successful day of celebration and action.
Marie McNair.
I thank the First Minister for that answer. I'm privileged to have already spoken at 2 fantastic International Women's Day events in Clydebank with Moments of Freedom Women and the Zaro Community Initiative, both led by formidable women who push for social and economic integration of new Scots in our community. Therefore, will the First Minister join me in welcoming the contributions that local groups in Clydebank and Milngavie are making and advise what steps the Scottish Government is taking to accelerate action on gender equality for all women, in particular for those who face overlapping forms of oppression based on their identity?
First Minister.
I'm very happy to welcome the contribution of the Moments of Freedom Women and the Zaro Community Initiative to welcome new Scots. I know that the Moments of Freedom Women were one of over 80 organisations which hosted a community consultation as part of the work to update the New Scots Refugee Integration Strategy last year. Through our cross-policy working for the New Scots Delivery Plan, we're taking account of intersectional approaches to gender equality, including engaging New Scots on the delivery of Scotland's Equally Safe strategy and the wider violence against women and girls work to ensure the needs of New Scots are addressed. And of course, intersectionality is key to our work with the National Advisory Council on Women and Girls for accelerating action on gender equality.
Rachel Hamilton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. My constituent has been told that based on the current outpatient waiting list, he's required to wait 59 weeks for an orthopaedic appointment.
Ms Hamilton, sorry, I think your question has been... Is this in relation to question number 4? I think... Yes, we will get to general constituency supplementaries at a later point. I call Tess White.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Women's human rights are being abused in Scotland due to the treatment of biological males as females. A report was published this week by Women's Rights Network with spine-chilling figures of rapes and sexual assaults in Scottish hospitals. And it's not just our hospitals. Women are being placed in harm's way, both physically and psychologically, in Scottish prisons, rape crisis centres, toilets and changing rooms. In the week of International Women's Day, if the First Minister is not alarmed by this, shame on him. And if the First Minister wants to do something about it to accelerate action, which is the theme of International Women's Day, will he meet with myself and other cross-party MSPs as a matter of urgency? How can any progress on women's equality be made without this? Thank you.
Thank you, First Minister.
Presiding Officer, I'm absolutely committed, and anyone that's listened to anything I've said from during my tenure as First Minister, I am absolutely committed to protecting and asserting the safety of women and girls in our society. And I'm exercising leadership, as I have done from the moment I became First Minister, to challenge what is the underpinning issue that affects the safety of women and girls in society, and that is the behaviour of men. And I will be unapologetic in setting out that point of view from my position as a male First Minister, exercising leadership to make sure that men face up to their responsibilities to ensure that women can live safely in our society. Women and girls can live safely in our society today.
Katie Clark.
It has recently been reported that almost 10% of the 2,000 women who have died at the hands of men in the UK over the last 15 years have been killed by their own sons. What more does the First Minister believe the Scottish Government can do to raise awareness of this risk and improve support for women?
First Minister.
I think Katie Clark puts an incredibly serious point to me, and it comes back to the answer I've just given, that there is a responsibility on all of society to try to help men, boys and men, to improve their conduct and their actions, because that will be the route to addressing the fundamental issue that Katie Clark puts to me, that will result in the protection of mothers and women who face danger. So she has my absolute assurance, and I am very happy to work across the political spectrum to do all that we can to culturally improve the attitudes and approaches of men and boys in our society, because I believe it to be fundamental to addressing the serious issue that she puts to me.
Ash Regan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Despite the First Minister's warm words during the answer to this question, I feel he is woefully out of touch on the situation of women's rights across Scotland. Therefore, it is utterly impossible to accelerate action towards gender equality when women's human rights are under attack. The Scottish Government must now apologise for their role in this and break from these state-sanctioned abuses. Will the First Minister make a clear commitment today to upholding the internationally protected human rights of women and girls in Scotland?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, I will not accept the charge, and I reject it entirely, of state-sanctioned abuses. I will not accept that charge in any way, shape or form from Ash Regan. I've put on the record my absolute commitment to the protection of women and girls in our society. That underpins the policy agenda of my government, and it will underpin my conduct as First Minister.
Question number 5, Annie Wells.
Sir, to ask the First Minister what plans the Scottish Government has to tackle the reported rising numbers and cases of drug driving.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, in 2019 a new drug driving offence was introduced which added to the powers available to keep Scotland's roads safe. Whilst I was concerned to see an increase in the number of positive tests by Police Scotland, it is clear that their focused enforcement approach is helping to tackle the scourge of drug driving using the new law. We fully support the enforcement efforts of Police Scotland in addressing drug driving, and the budget will increase police funding by £70 million to £1.62 billion to support capacity and capability.
Annie Wells.
I thank the First Minister for his answer. Earlier this week, the Scottish Sun reported how drug driving in Scotland now eclipses drink driving by about 3 to 1. And what seems even more incredible is that when police pull over someone suspected of drug driving, the subsequent testing proves their suspicions were correct on more than 50% of occasions. In contrast, for drink driving, the tests are positive in around 1 in 20 cases. Drink driving initiatives over the years have been hailed for their positive impact and their role in making it far less socially accepted than it was in past generations, and saving lives in the process. So does the First Minister have plans to do something similar with drug driving?
First Minister.
I think yes is the point. I would agree with what Annie Wells has put to me. The Police Scotland, during the festive period just a few months ago, strengthened the drink and drug driving campaign. So I hope that gives Annie Wells some assurance that that will now be woven into the approach that the Government is taking and Police Scotland are taking. If I could reassure Annie Wells that there is a very high conviction rate for drug driving. In 22-23 it was 95% of those who were accused, so a very high level of conviction as a consequence of charges being brought. But the point that she makes about the necessity of raising awareness and about the dangers is one that I accept unreservedly, and we will make sure that that's reflected in the overall messaging that is issued on this question.
Question number 6, Faisal Chowdhury.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister whether he will provide an update on how the Scottish Government is working to tackle Islamophobia in Scotland, in light of reports that anti-Muslim hate incidents across the UK reached record levels in 2024.
Minister.
President Officer, the rise in anti-Muslim hate is of serious concern. The Scottish Government unequivocally condemns all forms of Islamophobia and the impact it has on individuals, families and communities. This is why we work cooperatively with a range of partners to tackle such pernicious behaviour. Our hate crime strategy and associated delivery plan includes strategic priorities for tackling both hate crime and Islamophobia in Scotland. Importantly, the strategy was informed by those with lived experience of Islamophobia, which is central to understanding the challenges that we face in this area.
Faisal Chowdhury.
Thank you. I thank the First Minister for the answer. The First Minister will know that last Friday was the beginning of Ramadan, a time of reflection, peace and hope for Muslims in Scotland and worldwide. But Muslim communities across the UK and Scotland are now facing hatred at a higher level than ever. The UK Labour Government has now convened a working group on Islamophobia, which will create a definition of Islamophobia. So will the Scottish Government implement this definition? And can the First Minister say when we will see a real progress on the implementation of the recommendation from the cross-party group, the inquiry into Islamophobia in Scotland?
First Minister.
On the cross-party group report, there were two recommendations, I think, that were levelled at the Scottish Government. One was to increase the understanding of Islamophobia in the curriculum in our schools, and the other was to ensure that the public sector equality duty was enforced in schools. And I can assure Mr Chowdhury those priorities have been taken forward by the Scottish Government. I think it's absolutely vital that we do all that we can to ensure that we take steps on this issue. We will consider any decision made by the United Kingdom Government on the issue of a definition of Islamophobia and consider any implications for our own approach to adopting a definition once that material is clear from the United Kingdom Government.
Brief supplementary, Audrey Nicholl.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The growing levels of Islamophobia seen in the UK are deeply concerning, and it's absolutely vital we recognise that more must be done. So can the First Minister further outline how he hopes the gathering with representatives from key organisations that Faisal Chowdhury referenced, alongside the leaders of Scotland's parliamentary parties announced last week, will assist in creating a more cohesive society where everyone feels at home?
First Minister.
So last week I set out my aspiration to draw together leaders from across Scotland, including from our parliamentary parties, to consider how we can agree a common approach to asserting the values of our country in order to bring people together and to create a cohesive society where everyone feels safe at home. I'm very heartened by the response from civic society and from parliamentary party leaders, and I hope that we will be able to convene that gathering on the 23rd of April. My objective is to draw people together to encourage community cohesion, which involves working to tackle the hatred and prejudice that Mr Chowdhury has raised today and which has been echoed by Audrey Nicholl. And I look forward to utilising that gathering to create a firm foundation for the values of Scottish society.
Thank you. We move to constituency and general supplementaries. If we're all concise, more members will have an opportunity for scrutiny. And I call Alexander Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, police officers in my region across Scotland are suffering burnout, low morale and working in desperate conditions, according to a report out this week. The same report showed 68,000 rest days were cancelled in just 6 months. The pressure being put on police officers to meet the demands placed upon them is clearly unsustainable. So what measures will the Scottish Government put in place to ensure that these hard-pressed and under-pressure officers are given the support they rightly deserve?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, I value the work that police officers undertake within Scotland, and we support Police Scotland with the financial resources to enable them to deliver those services across the country. The Chief Constable has put in place a variety of measures to support the mental health and well-being of police officers. That is undertaken through an employee assistance programme which focuses on mental health support and provides enhanced occupational health services for police officers. The Your Wellbeing Matters programme offers a range of services to care for the psychological, physical, social and financial well-being of police officers, and I welcome the impact that has on supporting police officers.
Thank you. George Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Figures released this week show that over 200 million free bus journeys have been made across Scotland by under-22s. As this is Scottish Apprenticeship Week, can the First Minister provide further detail about how this scheme is supporting apprentices in Paisley and across Scotland to work, learn and earn?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, the concessionary bus travel scheme has been an unparalleled success, and it has crucially given young people much greater mobility within our society, enabling young people to be able to access a much wider range of employment and training opportunities around the country. Now, that will have a profound effect in all communities in the country, but I know it will be very precious for Mr Adam that it has that effect in the Paisley constituency. But I know from my own dialogue with young people of the positive impact of this policy instrument and its increasing opportunities and life chances for young people in Scotland.
Rhoda Grant.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The First Minister will be aware that communities in South Uist and Barra are suffering a 5th year of extreme ferry failure, and this is causing irreversible damage to the local economy. Can I therefore ask the First Minister what resource can be set aside for a resilience fund for businesses and communities on the brink of collapse due to this failure?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, I am very familiar with the issues that Rhoda Grant raises with me. I had discussions about this question when I was in South Uist some years ago, and I saw correspondence last night which was sent to me by the local member, Dr Alistair Allen, in relation to the very issues that have been raised by the South Uist business community. I am sorry for the disruption that is being felt. We believed we would have been in a stronger position in terms of resilience of the ferry network, but there have been delays to some of the ferries that we expected to be coming towards us, with which Rhoda Grant will be familiar and Parliament has been advised. I am considering the proposals that have been put to me, as is the Transport Secretary from the South Uist business community, and we will update members, including Rhoda Grant, on any response from the Government to those proposals.
Claire Haughey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I remind Chamber that I hold a bank nurse contract with Greater Glasgow and Clyde NHS. New figures show that CAM's targets were met in the final quarter of 2024, with 90.6% of patients seen within 18 weeks of referral. While there's still more to be done to build on this progress, can the First Minister advise how his government's investment in mental health services in the 25-26 budget will ensure that this target is consistently met in the future, delivering the best possible outcomes for young people who rely on these services?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, it is important that we continue to make progress on this issue, and I welcome the fact that the 18-week target has been met in the last quarter of 2024. In response to the specific question that Claire Haughey puts to me, there is £123 million that's been allocated through the Enhanced Mental Health Outcomes Framework in the budget for next year, which I hope will help to continue to build on the progress that's been made in the current financial year.
Edward Mountain.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. NHS Highlands vascular services have been in terminal decline for years. Sadly, our last vascular surgeon has just resigned because he feels the way the service is delivered is a threat to life and limb. Given that we have more hospital beds in NHS Highland and more vascular surgery theatres in NHS Highland, will the First Minister ask his Health Secretary to review the situation, because it is unacceptable that patients in the Highlands are being put in taxis and ambulances late at night to get to the Central Belt to get surgery?
First Minister.
I think that Mr Mountain raises an important point. Indeed, it was one of the issues that the Health Secretary and I discussed with, not that specific issue, but the general question. Was one about how we deliver healthcare in areas where recruitment and employment can be a challenge, but where, as Mr Mountain correctly puts to me, there is physical capacity to undertake some of that surgical activity within the Health Board facilities. So part of what we are trying to work on is how we work collaboratively within health boards to address the very circumstances that Mr Mountain puts to me, so that we can use that capacity, which will help us to reduce waiting times and meet the needs of his constituents and others. So it's very much a live part of the activity the Health Secretary and I are taking forward to make sure that the needs of constituents are met around the country.
Bob Doris.
Presiding Officer, the United Nations Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights this week called on the UK Labour Government to immediately repeal its two-child cap, as it violates children's rights and exacerbates poverty and social inequality. In that context, can I ask the First Minister for an update on the work of our SNP government to end the two-child cap here in Scotland, and will he join my calls for Westminster to yet again scrap Labour's cruel two-child cap at source, which, let us not forget, is designed deliberately to deny 1.6 million children on low-income families simply enough money to live on?
First Minister.
Let me reassure Mr Doris that the work that the Government is taking forward, which involves the design of systems to enable us to lift the two-child cap, which is one of the policy priorities and commitments in the Government's budget for the forthcoming year, is all underway, and we are making the necessary progress on that question. On the wider issue about obviously this is a measure which will help us to lift children out of poverty. That will not be assisted by some of the speculation we've heard over the course of the last few days. about significant reductions in the welfare budget, which will undoubtedly have the effect of jeopardising the incomes of households in Scotland, and particularly to affect child poverty levels in our country as well.
Richard Leonard.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and can I remind members of my register of interests? Does the First Minister share my concern that industrial action is set to begin at Scottish Water this weekend? And what does he say to the Scottish Water trade union representatives gathered in the public gallery today about his ministers sanctioning bonuses to the bosses of Scottish Water, which are over 10 times greater than the pay rise now being offered to the workers of Scottish Water?
First Minister.
The first thing I would like to say is that I saw during the week news that Mr Leonard is intending not to seek re-election to Parliament, and I express my warmest wishes to him and commend him for his service in the Scottish Parliament, which has been full of impact on many of these issues and some of the issues that he puts to me on behalf of employees in Scotland today, for which I have the greatest of respect. The issue of strike action at Scottish Water is obviously a matter for Scottish Water, and I would encourage the Scottish Water leadership and the trade unions to try to find a solution that avoids disruption. On the question of bonuses, Mr Leonard will be familiar, because we've explained all of these details to Parliament, that when it comes to the recruitment of leadership in relation to Scottish Water, we are invariably in a competition with other water companies around the United Kingdom, in which these elements of bonus are part of the fabric of the financial settlements that are available to attract employees. Comparatively speaking, bonus payments for the leadership of Scottish Water are much, much lower than in other parts of the United Kingdom, and the performance of Scottish Water is much higher than other parts of the United Kingdom. So I acknowledge these are difficult comparisons to make, but they are part of the judgments that government has to arrive at about how we can attract the leadership to safeguard the important asset which is Scottish Water.
Rachel Hamilton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. My constituent has been told that based on current outpatient waiting times, he's required to wait 59 weeks for an orthopaedic appointment. If he then requires surgery, he will have to be added to the inpatient waiting queue and have to wait currently up to 91 weeks. In response to Anna Sarwar earlier on waiting times, the First Minister said that progress has been made. But it hasn't, has it, First Minister? So will you apologise personally to my constituent who will wait for weeks in agony?
First Minister.
Well, progress is being made. I said in my answers to Mr Sarwar, which I repeat in my answers to Rachel Hamilton, that figures published in February show a 4% decrease in the total waiting list for diagnostic tests. So we are making progress. I could cite, for example, a 44% decrease in imaging weights at NHS Fife, a 22% decrease in urology weights at NHS Forth Valley. So this progress has been made. And it will be helped by the investment the government is making in the National Health Service, which I just point out Rachel Hamilton didn't support. So it's all very well coming here and complaining about issues in the National Health Service. If Rachel Hamilton is not prepared to support the financial investment to go in, and actually, in fact, Rachel Hamilton represents a position that wants to reduce public expenditure by £1 billion to afford a tax cut. Now, how that will get orthopaedic appointments undertaken is beyond me. So the government is investing. We're making as much progress to reduce waiting lists, and I will be happy to update Rachel Hamilton on the progress that we make in the weeks to come.
And Neil Bibby.
Thank you. According to Police Scotland, between April of last year and February this year, there has been 132 road casualties in Renfrewshire, up over a quarter compared to the same period the year before. Speed awareness courses have been in operation in England and Wales to help the police since 2007. But as Chris Musson of The Sun wrote this week, there are still none available in Scotland, despite the Scottish Government first looking at this 16 years ago in 2009. In 2023, the Justice Secretary stated the Scottish Government, and I quote, agrees that speed awareness courses will have a positive impact on driver behaviour and accepts that research shows that such interventions reduce reoffending. So can I ask the First Minister, does the Scottish Government still support speed awareness courses? Why are we still waiting for them to be rolled out, and when will they start?
Minister. Well, accept the point that Mr Bibby is putting to me. I'll have a look at this question and see what action the government can take to address the question. Fundamentally, there is, we have in place speed limits which are very clearly and manifestly advertised to individuals, so there's a level of personal responsibility that is at the start of all this. But if there are speed awareness courses that can help in addressing these questions, I'll happily consider those issues, and I'll write to Mr Bibby with what steps the government is prepared to take.
Thank you. That concludes First Minister's questions. The next item of business is a members' business debate in the name of Marie McNair, and there will now be a short suspension to allow those leaving the chamber and gallery to do so.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Lewis McGlynn.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Saoirse Healy.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Donald C. Stewart. Broadcasting Scotland is Scotland's independent broadcaster, providing factual news, reporting on the issues important to the people of Scotland.
We are committed to public service broadcasting, and with your support, we will produce even more programmes.
Provide opportunities for young people interested in media production and broadcasting, and challenge preconceptions of what Scottish media looks like, amplifying Scotland's voice and reflecting its communities.
We can already deliver high-quality live news, and we will create the highest quality programmes for you to enjoy, but we can only do that with your support.
So please subscribe to and share our channel or donate to Broadcasting Scotland via the link in the description. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.